So in this symposium, we're exploring a fresh perspective to the study of human mobility in the context of environmental change. It's often talked about in a very alarmist sense, like that climate change will cause millions of people to move, causing chaos and distress. But we know from our studies in our community that the practice is very different. Reality is much more complex and much more nuanced than that alarmist message. So what we do in this symposium is further exploring and strengthen that alternative message, and we do that through Mobilities lens.
Mobilities for me is about understanding a complex world, a system that is already in flux.
Even though we traditionally prioritize international migration, Mobilities lets us see everyday micro-mobilities. The short distance commute, the moving back and forth between land and the sea, and how these are privileged forms of movement for people.
They are involuntary, immobile on a local scale, but they don't wish to migrate, they want to stay in their village.
I mean, there are lots of bad stories, but what is important for knowledge practice is to imagine the alternative, not to reproduce the status quo, but how to imagine a different reality to act.
Temperature ranges on the planet are about to change considerably, and so is habitability. So we can't stop the movement, but we can start to understand and deal with how we deal with the change and coming together as different groups of people under a changing planet.
So if that's the headline sort of urgency statement, then the next thing could be something like, the sciences and the social sciences have a really fundamental role to play in confronting that problem.
You really need to take your message out of your comfort zone.
Well, I guess the most important thing that I took from this session is that environmental change is not the sole and in many cases not the most important driver. There are social and economic and political forces that might be even more important for forcing people or making people move and being mobile in a small scale, but also in terms of migration.
This conference really helps me putting together different issues that are interesting for my PhD thesis. It helps me to reflect on mobility justice perspective, on uneven mobilities, and how it's also important to look at when we think about how the environment and mobilities intersect.